Welcome, everyone. I have 11 o'clock on my clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. As you probably already know, my name is Richard Swan. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning, and we'd like to thank you for being here at our Teach Anywhere series. And we are happy to welcome Peter Midgley from the Copyright Office, and he will lead today's workshop. And so I will turn the time over to Peter.
Thanks, Richard. I really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. And so I'll take everyone's silence as an acknowledgement that you can see the screen. We're just going to go ahead and launch right into it today. We're covering copyright essentials for remote teaching, and we need to begin with just outlining what copyright covers. It's a broad category of works, as you can see, ranging everywhere from literature to choreography, movies, sound recordings. So, you know, most of the content that you find online, you're going to see covered as being protected by copyright. The exclusive rights that are enjoyed by the copyright holder, this is an important legal concept that we need to start with. So if you own a copyright, you have these 6 exclusive rights, and each one is important and is a potentially separate cause of action. That's why we need to think through them each as we go through various copyright scenarios in connection with our teaching. We need to think about which rights are being implicated. And in the context of remote teaching, really, it's the right of reproduction. We're making copies of works, the right of public performance, and the right of public display of this group of 6 that are going to be the most important. So for the rest of this discussion, we're going to focus primarily on these 3 of the 6 exclusive rights of a copyright holder. We've prepared some examples, and my colleague Cami Stevenson is going to start. Let me see, Cami, if I can give you control over the keyboard, and I think Perfect. You should be able to go from there.
Yes. So our first example here is teaching with AV, so audiovisual materials, in our online courses. So we have this example of a commercial music instructor who wants to incorporate video content into a remote course. She found a YouTube video that she believes will be a great way to start the class. She wants to navigate to YouTube, so actually go out to YouTube and perform the video for her class. So I'm going to show you exactly what we mean, what that looks like. You know, if you're doing a Zoom lecture and you navigate to the video on YouTube here.
Hey guys, heads up. Everything you've been told about shampoo and conditioner.
Law. You're having a hard time getting shows, recording, selling records? How about suing a major artist? If you came up with a melody or a beat or a lyric, you can sue anyone.
I get to sue all my favorite musicians.
Bruce Springsteen, Elton John, Radiohead. Come in and you go, hey man, I recorded this little tune, ba ba ba. I go, shut up. Ba ba ba, is that what you said? Mm-hmm. Ba ba ba. Go online, find a song. It's weird. Am I crazy? The lawsuit has begun. I don't even have to hear your melody for me to know that someone else stole it. They think you're stupid. I'm here to say that you might be stupid, but I'm smart. And I can represent you, the dum-dum. I'm like the lead singer. And in court, that's my stage.
I think Mark should win a Grammy.
Oh, come on.
We're suing.
Listen to these clients.
Okay, so that's our example. If an instructor wanted to go to that exact page, just like there, that's going to be this example. And Peter, for some reason, I'm not being able to get back to the PowerPoint.
Let me get there.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to get this next question here, and we're going to have a little bit of an interactive moment. We're going to do a poll. So if you look at these 3 exclusive rights, which of the rights do you think this previous scenario implicates? Just a few more seconds here. Okay, Peter, you're going to go ahead and we'll hit end here. All right, so here are our results. Thank you everyone for participating. The top choice here, as you can see, is public display. that's actually in this instance not the right that's being implicated. It's actually the right of public performance. So a display would be showing an image or something, showing a still image in the course of a lecture. This would actually be the public performance right. And so as you're thinking through, okay, you have this activity you want to do, you know which right you're implicating. So here we have the public performance right. Our office has created a tool that will help kind of walk you through figuring out what types of rights you need to secure, what types of permissions you have. And so I'm going to walk you through that now. And again, Peter, I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it. Can you navigate us to the decision trail?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So if you come to our homepage here, you can see right here on the homepage is our copyright decision trail. So if we click on it here, okay, and you can go to the decision trail. So this is a tool, like I said, it should be pretty intuitive. You can hit start and it's going to ask you a series of 5 questions to help you decide how you can use copyrighted content. So the first question here is the work in the public domain? If you are familiar with the public domain, you know what that is, great. If not, you can kind of hover over the yes and no buttons here and see a little bit of information about what is and is not in the public domain. If you have more questions, you can always click on the question mark here and we'll give you more information along with some training videos. For this video that we've seen on YouTube, it was not published. It's not an old video. It was not published prior to 1925. So it's not in the public domain. So I'm gonna go ahead and select no. This next question asks, do you have permission to use the content? So again, you can hover here or here and get a little bit more information. Click the question mark here. It will tell you there are some works that will be proactively licensed by the copyright, and so in certain circumstances you are able to use them. This video on YouTube is not one of those instances, so I'm going to go ahead and select no. The next question asks, is there an exemption that covers your use? So again, you can hit yes or no if you understand and you have all the information you need to answer that question. If not, you can hit this question mark here. And there are 3 primary exemptions that we use in academia. So we have the face-to-face teaching exemption, again, not relevant here because we're doing online remote instruction. But you can see the TEACH Act here is for distance education. So we think, okay, maybe that's relevant here because what we're doing is distance education. So if you actually click on this tab, it will take you to our website to what we call the TEACH Act overview. So the TEACH Act is a provision in copyright law that allows for the performance or the display of copyrighted works in certain circumstances. And so you can see here, there's information on our page here that will show you when the TEACH Act may apply, when it does not apply. So the TEACH Act, again, just covers the performance or the display rights. So when Peter was talking about the exclusive rights of a copyright holder, the TEACH Act will potentially cover just those 2 rights. If you come here, it will we have all of our requirements. So if you have questions on what do I need to do to actually comply with the TEACH Act, we've broken them down into 3 separate categories: instructor, technology, and institutional requirements. At BYU, the institutional requirements are generally satisfied, so you don't need to worry about those. And if you're using a password protected LMS, so you're using Learning Suite or Canvas or something like that, generally the technology requirements we've fulfilled. So as the instructor, you would just need to worry about this tab here. But if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to our office. And so I want to come to actually this TEACH Act flowchart here to ask, okay, is my showing of this YouTube video navigating out to YouTube covered by the TEACH Act? So you can see here, the first question is, are you transmitting a performance or a display of a copyrighted work? So again, we're not dealing with reproduction, we're not dealing with distribution. What we are doing, as we established through our poll, is we're publicly performing the work. So our answer here is yes, and we continue on to question 2. So we get to, will the performance or display be given by means of a lawfully made copy? So in this instance, we're navigating out to YouTube, to the source, so we're okay here. We get to question 3, is the work produced or marketed primarily for use in online education? That YouTube video is part of Portlandia, it's an entertainment series, it's not marketed or produced for educational use. So we go ahead and answer no here, which allows us to continue on to question 4. Is the performance or display made by or for an instructor and directly related to the teaching objectives of the class? So here we can say yes, it's our instructor who's navigated out. The video is relevant to the teaching objectives of the class session. And then we get to this question 5, and these are the technology requirements that we talked about on the previous slide, but it just is making sure that this performance that we're transmitting is being made available only to the students, and that there are technological measures in place that students will not be able to retain or further distribute to disseminate the materials after the class session. So as long as we satisfy all of these, we move on to, we say yes to question 5 in this instance. And so we get to this last table here that says the Teach Act does cover our use. Now we need to figure out how much of the work the Teach Act covers us, gives us the ability to perform. So again, we're dealing with the performance right in this instance. We look at the type of work. If it was non-dramatic, literary, or musical work, the Teach Act would cover the performance in its entirety. However, what we're dealing with, this YouTube video, would qualify under this any other work category here. It's an audiovisual work, and so the Teach Act covers limited and reasonable portions of the work. What that typically means in practice is that as long as you are only using as much as you need to fulfill your learning objectives, you should be okay here. So the great news is, for this first scenario, we know that the Teach Act covers our performance of the work. And since that's the only right that's implicated, we're good to go with our first example. And let's see, Peter, can we navigate back to the, perfect. Okay, so we're going to take that same example that we used at the beginning and just tweak it slightly. So now we have an instructor who wants to incorporate the video into an online course, and they just want to provide the link to the syllabus to encourage students to watch the video. So we ask the question, does the instructor need to obtain permission? So we come back to our question of which rights are implicated by this scenario. So providing a link in the syllabus. We'll go ahead and start our poll here. All right, and go ahead and make your guess as to which rights are implicated by providing a link to students in the syllabus. I'll give it just a couple more seconds here. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead. Here are our results. And this was actually a bit of a trick question. So the fact is that providing a link to students actually does not implicate any of the rights of the copyright holder. So I'm not sure why this is, there we go, not advancing. So we don't need to, it's actually not implicating any of the rights. So we like to share links whenever possible. The one word of caution here, as you can see on the slide, we don't recommend, we don't condone sharing links to infringing or suspicious sources. So if I, Cami Stevenson, upload an entire, Marvel movie to my personal YouTube channel, you can pretty well guarantee that that's infringing, right? I don't have the rights to do that. If you have a textbook that's uploaded in its entirety to an individual's blog, that's probably a suspect source, and we would not recommend linking out to that content.
Can I ask a question quickly?
Yes.
So that's just the link, but is it the same as if you embed the YouTube video, or is that totally different?
They're kind of related concepts. So linking is great. Peter, I don't know if you want to provide input on the embedding question.
Yeah, that's a great question. As it turns out, there's actually some active litigation going on right now on the subject of embedding, and courts are divided on that. So our office, our recommendation, a best practice would be just to include a link whenever possible. If you need to embed, we can look at that on a case-by-case basis, but if a link will do, then that's always the better option.
Yeah, so great question, thank you. But yes, that is kind of the state of the law right now. Like Peter said, there's active litigation going on around this question. So when in doubt or when possible, just provide a link is the best way to do that. And then we have one more kind of tweak on this original example here. And I don't know if it's just a delay in my computer. Oh, here we go. Okay, so now we have the same instructor wants to use the same video, but they're concerned about a broken link. I know I get that question quite often. I'm concerned about a broken link, so I don't want to link out to something. So what the instructor wants to do is actually save a local copy of the video to her server and then upload it to the course, to the password protected LMS. So we have the question again, does the instructor need to obtain permission? We're going to do another poll here. So I'm going to go ahead, which of the rights, again, are implicated by this scenario? So actually saving a local copy and then uploading it to the LMS. All right, we'll give you a few more seconds here. Perfect, okay. So you can see here, most of you are doing great. So this actually implicates both the reproduction and the public performance. So we still have that public performance happening like we did in our first scenario, but we now have a reproduction on top of that. So what I want to show you here is we know that that public performance is covered by the Teach Act. We've already gone through that analysis. So what we want to look at now is just that reproduction. And so if we go back out to our decision trail, we know the work is not in the public domain. We know it's not, we don't have permission to use it. We don't have permission to reproduce that work. So again, get to this question of an exemption. And if we come back to our Teach Act page, so we're again dealing with distance education, so the Teach Act should always kind of pop up in your head. Like I mentioned, the Teach Act itself only covers the performance or the display. However, there is this companion provision in copyright law. It's section 112F that basically says, okay, if what you're doing, instructor, is making a Teach Act performance or display, and in the process of doing that, you need to make a reproduction of the copyrighted work, either in digital form or in certain circumstances, if you need to make an analog work, make a copy of an analog work. This provision will cover that sometimes. If you have questions on that, feel free to reach out to our office. But basically what it says is if you're making a reproduction in order to facilitate a Teach Act performance or a display, 112F will cover that reproduction as long as, and you can see the requirements here, the copy is only retained by BYU, no further copies are made or distributed, and that copy is used solely to make your Teach Act performance or display, to transmit that Teach Act performance or display. So as we think about this third example, actually saving a local copy, the performance is covered by the Teach Act, the reproduction is covered by this companion ephemeral recordings provision, section 112F. So if we go back now to our PowerPoint, a couple of points I want to make about this, making reproductions. So copyright law prohibits circumventing what are called technological protection measures that copyright holders put on, attach to their works in order to protect those works. So we recommend avoid ripping any sort of audiovisual works from YouTube, CDs, DVDs, because what you're doing is circumventing those technological protection measures. So instead of that, a way to be able to capture audiovisual content without circumventing technological protection measures is to basically use screen capture technology to get the playback that you need, whether it's audio or visual content. So that. Sorry.
Is there a question?
I have a question. So you said that they could, if there was a broken link, that they could have a copy of the video on their, like say on their learning suite. Did I misunderstand that?
No, so if there's a concern over broken links, again, linking is always the best way to do it because you're not infringing or implicating any of the copyright holders' rights. But the Teach Act will, in certain circumstances, again, you want to go through the Teach Act flowchart and make sure you qualify. The Teach Act will cover the performance or display, and then that ephemeral recordings provision will cover a reproduction made in order to facilitate that Teach Act performance.
But getting that reproduction, wouldn't you be ripping that off of YouTube?
That's where the screen capture technology, that's what we recommend that you use as opposed to ripping it. Ripping it, you're circumventing those technological protection measures, and that's a violation of copyright law.
I guess I'm confused. What's the difference? If you're making a copy, you're making a copy. It's just one's more of a legal way of making a copy.
Yeah, it's just how you're going about getting that content. So you're not, by using screen capture technology, you're not actually having to circumvent any of those technological protection measures. So when you put a DVD into a DVD player, there's technology built in that actually allows you to access the content on that DVD, even though it's protected. Ripping basically just comes in and it rips. I mean, that's what you're ripping open that technology to get what's inside. So screen capture is just kind of the better, more kosher way to access that same content.
Okay, so I just need to learn how to use screen capture then.
Yeah.
That's our recommendation, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We're all becoming Zoom experts. You can definitely use Zoom
Yes.
for this purpose.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that takes care of audio visual. We're going to move on to, oh, sorry, one more point before we move on is, oftentimes people say, oh, but I see this online all the time. You can see this headline here, an organization that was ripping audio content was shut down and was being sued for infringement. So just because websites exist, just because these things are out there, doesn't necessarily mean they're legal. So again, this point, the question that was just raised, ripping content is not recommended. It is in violation of copyright law. And so being able to find other ways of taking advantage of the exemptions that are available to us, just make sure that you are being sensitive and being aware of how you're going about getting this content.
Cami, can I ask a question?
Yeah, one more question.
Sure. Yeah, it's going back to what you and Peter were just saying about Zoom. That counts if we like show a video and we record that video for later use. Like I'm actually teaching in a Zoom class, showing the YouTube video. That counts as screen capture rather than or screencasting rather than ripping, right? Because I'm using that in my teaching at the present moment. Is that correct? Did I understand that correct?
Yes, I believe so. I think if I understand your question correctly, yes, if the video is incorporated as part of your lecture and you are recording that lecture through Zoom,
yes,
and making that recording available through your LMS,
yes,
yes, that would be
screen casting. Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm
Well, in
wrong.
fact, our goal was, I mean, we did that exact thing in this Zoom. We were trying to lead by example right here.
So showing the YouTube clip at the beginning, that's what we would do, right? Is just capture this session is being recorded and we showed that video and it's all being included now in that recording. So great question, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move on to images, teaching with images. The first example is, I know I've had professors in the past who've loved to start each lecture with a cartoon and showing something relevant to the day's discussion. So again, if we have an instructor who wants to just navigate out to a cartoon website, so I'm gonna click on this link here. If they want to just pull this up and have this visible just like this in their lecture, this is this first scenario. So they're actually navigating out to this site and showing this cartoon as part of their class discussion. So Peter, sorry, if we can get back to the, here we go. So our question again is which exclusive rights are implicated by what I've just done here, which is navigating out to the site and showing it to my class. Let's do a couple more seconds. I want to make sure that we don't run over our time. Okay, so 81% of you are correct. This is a public display. So wonderful. You guys are doing awesome on those. Okay, so we think about, okay, we're in this public display world. Again, we would go out to our decision trail and we would ask ourselves the first question, is it in the public domain? The cartoon is not in the public domain. We would come back to, do we have permission to use it? That cartoon site is not accessible through a BYU database. It's not licensed under Creative Commons, so we don't have permission to use it. So we again come to the question of, is there an exemption? If we go back to the Teach Act, to the web page, we'll see that the Teach Act allows for performance or display again. So we think the display right that we're using. So we'd answer yes to one. Is it made by a lawfully obtained copy? Again, we're going to the source URL, so we're okay on question 2. That cartoon is not marketed primarily for online educational teaching. And so we can answer no to question 3, which allows us to continue down this path. Is the performance made by the instructors, by or for the instructor and directly related to classroom content? In this instance, it is. So we answer yes to 4, which takes us to 5. Again, as long as we have technological protection measures in place that allow students to only access the content for the class session, they're not able to further reproduce or distribute the content, we're okay on question 5, which brings us down to our table again. We know that now our display is covered by the Teach Act. So we ask ourselves, we come down to the type of use, which is a display. You'll see the category, any work under the Teach Act for a display is allowed in an amount comparable to what is done in a face-to-face classroom setting. So if you just have the display up there for a few minutes, like you would at the start of a normal face-to-face class, the Teach Act will cover your display. So that first
I have a question.
Yes.
Question number 4, is the performance or display made by or for an instructor? I mean, this cartoon was not made by the instructor or for the instructor, but you keep saying it's yes. Can you?
So the display is made by or for the instructor. So the cartoon itself was not created by or for the instructor, but that display that's happening, showing it to the class, that display is made by or for the instructor.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Good question. Thank you. Okay, so we know it's a display, which means that it's covered under the Teach Act in an amount comparable to what is done in a face-to-face classroom setting. So we'll go back to our PowerPoint here. Again, we're going to tweak this example just a little bit. And we now say, okay, this time the instructor wants to reproduce the cartoon, include it in the PowerPoint as part of the recorded lecture, and then also include it as a standalone PowerPoint file for students to refer back to throughout the semester.
So Cami, I hate to cut you off, but we're running short on time. We're going to have to probably skip ahead, I'm afraid. So
no problem.
Anyway, I know we want to just be clear about this. Go ahead.
So we just have, again, Teach Act requirements. It's going to cover a display in an amount comparable to live classroom settings. And we just need to make sure that we have technological measures in place to prevent retention or further dissemination by students. Again, if you're uploading through a password protected LMS, generally this is going to be covered here. So then our last one, if you have images you're wondering, how do I find these images? If you want to include, like, let's say this image here, I'm going to forego the polling. We have our public display and potentially reproduction. We go back to our decision trail. In this case, we come to this question of, do you have permission to use it? This specific image is actually licensed by Creative Commons, which is an organization that's created a suite of licenses. Creators can proactively attach to their works that allow you to use the works under certain conditions. Almost every Creative Commons license does provide or does require some sort of an attribution. So you can see down here in this bottom left-hand corner, the attribution can be as simple as photo by author with the license terms. So photo is hyperlinked out to the direct URL source where we found the image. The author's name is hyperlinked to their page, and then the license here is hyperlinked to the Creative Commons license terms. And our office has a really quick 1-minute video to show you how you can actually find these types of images through Google image searching. So that's this next slide here.
Today we want to show you a little known but invaluable tool if you're looking for royalty-free images for use in a creative project, and it's all built right into Google. Say I'm looking for a great picture of a shark for a new brochure I'm working on called "What's a Card Shark? Sharks Can't Play Cards and Other Fun Facts About Sharks." Working title. All I have to do is go to Google, search shark, then hit the Images tab. Over here, there's a little button called Tools. Click on that, and from the new filtering menu, select Usage Rights. Select the usage rights you need for your project. My brochure needs me to modify this photo slightly, so I'll choose the rights labeled Reuse with Modification. Then Google will sort the photos for you. It's always wise to go to the site that hosts the photo to double check that you can use it the way you want, but this search tool will help you find photos that have been specifically designated for reuse in creative projects. So there you go. It's just a quick tool built into Google, and it should save you a ton of time.
That video is available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to refer back to it, just the BYU Copyright YouTube channel. Then Peter, I will turn it over to you for supplemental readings.
Okay, thanks, Cami. So I know we've got a lot of material to cover, and our time is short, so I'll just be very quick. A few examples. Course Reserve is a service that I hope many of you are familiar with. This is run by the library. So here's an example where an economics professor wants to share this article through the Course Reserve system. It's 26 pages long. Does the instructor need to worry about getting copyright permission? The answer is no, because the Course Reserve team will handle all that for you. So again, if you just navigate out to the library's website, Course Reserve is right here. And you know, when you'll be prompted to log in and create and modify a Course Reserve request. Here's a tutorial if you need any help. That'll be beyond the scope of today's presentation. But once you do that and submit your materials, you'll come to a screen that looks like this, and you can add any of these types of items, and the Course Reserve staff will determine whether or not that qualifies for fair use or any other exemption. It can cover everything from articles to images. So any of that content that you're wondering, can I include it in my course? And but I want to make it available electronically to students. Course Reserve is a great option for you. Here's an example where a professor wants to make 11 pages from this book available in a printed course pack to a small class with 5 PhD students. This book is 176 pages long, and it retails for $32.95. So the professor is wondering, do I need to get permission to include 11 pages from this book in that course packet? And again, if you go through the BYU store, there's a staff in place that will do all the copyright checking for you, and to the extent a license is required, the store will go about securing that license. So for you as a professor, it's you don't need to worry about it. And again, I don't have time necessarily to demonstrate that. The final example would be to upload an excerpt to your own Learning Suite page. So in this example, it's the same education professor as the last one. Here's a big 619-page book that sells for almost $150. They want to put 2 chapters, 37 pages. You know, they have a copy of the book in their office. They want to scan it and upload it to Learning Suite or Canvas or wherever. And so in this instance, there's no Course Reserve staff, there's no bookstore staff that's doing any kind of copyright checking for you. You're going to be on your own to decide whether or not this is permissible. And if you go through our decision trail, in this case, again, normally we would have asked you which rights are being implicated. In this case, you're talking about the right of reproduction, you know, when you're scanning and uploading to Learning Suite. But as you go through the decision trail, what you're going to find is, let me just pull it up real quick here. You are, let's see, if we just start at the top again, this is a work that's not in the public domain. It's not really old. You don't have permission to use it. It's not Creative Commons licensed. There's not an exemption that covers this use because we're dealing with reproduction, not performance or display. So we're in this area of fair use. Fair use, when you click on this, it'll take you to our checklist, which this is a really one-of-a-kind tool that our office has developed in collaboration with Clark Acey at the law school. So basically, fair use, as probably many of you know, is a very fact-dependent, case-specific kind of analysis. So we analyze more than 400 cases, and basically we take, if you walk through, you know, you can fill out this information if you want to. We're going to skip the classroom guidelines for now, but then you go question by question through here. So in this case, our use is not commercial. We're not selling copies of this book. It's not a parody. We're using it for a teaching purpose. We're not doing any bad faith. It's not a transformative use. Transformative means basically that you are using the work for some purpose other than which it was intended. In this case, we're using this book, this SAGE textbook, which is marketed for education. So we're not using it in a different way than what it was intended. The second factor in a fair use analysis is the nature of the work itself. We have some questions to kind of help you figure that out. This case, it's not a highly creative work. It is published, which means that this factor favors fair use, so we can select that. The third factor is the amount and substantiality of the portion used. This is the question on which we get the most questions. Probably a lot of people seem to think that somehow if you use 10% of a work or less, that qualifies as fair use. That's simply not the case. In this instance, 37 pages is a substantial part of the work, so we would click yes. It's not the heart of the work, but overall we would say no. This factor, because we're using 37 pages out of this work, is quite a bit, so we're going to say yes, or that factor does not favor us. And then this fourth and final factor is the market for the work. Is the work under commercial exploitation? Yes, it's being sold. Does it act as a market substitute? You know, here we're saying 37 pages is not much of a substitute for a 600-page book, but there is a licensing market in place. So it is acting as a market substitute in that licensing market. We can locate the copyright holder, and we will give attribution. Ultimately, because this use would basically supplant the licensing market, we would answer no to this question. When we run this through the analysis and compare it against those 400 cases, in this particular case, the tool would tell us that this likely does not qualify as fair use. And as you may have guessed, this particular scenario was based, in fact, on a real example from a case involving Georgia State University, in which this particular work was found not to be a fair use. To help you remember the factors, those 4 factors, again, purpose, nature, amount, and impact, our office has developed kind of this little mnemonic. Not that fair use is a pain, but there you go. You can remember each of the 4 factors. And if you, as a faculty member, are absolutely welcome to do this analysis on your own and decide on a case-by-case basis whether you're comfortable uploading something to Learning Suite in these cases, but you're then responsible for the analysis. So if you want to delegate that responsibility to the course reserve staff or the bookstore staff, you can do that. But if you want to take it on yourself, that's fine. We just recommend using that tool that I just outlined to help you make the decision. Again, I know we're a few minutes over our allotted time. Cammie and I are more than happy to stay and answer any questions that anybody has, but I wanted to be respectful of folks' time. And so really appreciate you tuning in for this session. If anybody has questions, we'll be glad to linger.
I have a quick question about the Google labeled for use with modification. What's the difference between that and labeled for non-commercial use? What does the non-commercial versus not non-commercial mean?
So what Google is doing there, Cammie alluded to the Creative Commons licensing model. Here, let me pull that up real quick. So if you just go to like creativecommons.org, this is an organization. It's a nonprofit organization that makes these licenses available. And so when you want to share your work, you would come up here and you would choose the license that you as the creator desire. So you can go through this little tool here. Let me show you. And you can say, hey, I don't want commercial uses of my work to happen. And so when you check no on that, now it's limited. You can see how it just added this little symbol here. That means people downstream from you, if they want to use it commercially, you have not licensed that use. So what's happening is Google Images is retrieving this metadata and filtering out from all of the photographers who've uploaded their images. When you select that particular filter, you're then going to be limited to people who have made this selection.
Okay.
I think maybe a little bit more to that is non-commercial uses. Generally what we do in our courses in academic situations will be considered non-commercial, whereas if you're using something for marketing, let's say you're the faculty advisor for a certain club or something, and there's like a fundraiser or something that's happening, that a use in that situation would be considered more commercial in nature. And so that's where the non-commercial commercial distinction will likely come into play.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, you bet.
Other questions or anything?
I have a question. So there's a program called Hypothesis that the university has introduced us to for students to do like social reading. So basically you can like upload a PDF and all the students can annotate the same PDF. So if I get permission like from Course Reserve to use certain readings, is it okay then to take a copy of that PDF and upload it to Hypothesis for students to annotate together?
Interesting question. I think That scenario would implicate one of the rights that we didn't highlight, which would be the right of adaptation or creating a derivative work. So just off the cuff here, you would go through what I would recommend is going through the fair use analysis on that. I don't think, well, it's possible if it's been licensed through Course Reserve that the license would cover those kinds of variations. So in the world of music licensing, for example, our music faculty often go and obtain a specific license to go and make a derivative work. You know, if we're doing an arrangement for men's chorus of some Broadway number or something like that, that's the precise kind of license that we get, is a license to go make derivatives. So it's possible that Course Reserve would be obtaining a license like that for this textual work. But in the event that the activity that you're describing is not covered by the license, then it may qualify as a fair use anyway. And so I would just recommend going through that fair use decision-making tool to help you analyze each of the 4 factors. There's a good chance, I would think, in that instance that it would qualify as fair use. But you just have to go through the analysis to make a decision.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
I've got a scenario I know is going to kind of come up in the fall. The textbook I'm using for my course is available at BYU. If you just click on the link, BYU has paid for essentially a copy or license for students to go out and look at. But you have to be on the BYU network to get there. I know that there's going to be a few students who choose to stay home and kind of take the course remotely, but they won't have access to the book. Is there a way that I could make that available to them without them having to be on BYU's campus to access that?
That is a great technical question. Richard, I don't know if you happen to know the answer to that question. I feel like that's more of a technology question than a copyright one.
Well,
do you happen to know, Richard?
So I can just click on it and download it. I'm wondering, is it legal for me to put it on Learning Suite? Because any student that's at BYU can get access to that through that link.
Yeah,
because that's what they'll ask me to do is, can't you just post it on Learning Suite?
Right. Every time you're making a reproduction, you have to ask whether that reproduction is authorized. So maybe a good example that's kind of probably familiar to many of us is that the church's hymnal has a number of hymns that are licensed for reproduction in the hymn book, but not licensed for other reproductions elsewhere. So, you know, How Great Thou Art, hymn number 84 is a good example of that, or 219, Because I Have Been Given Much. So if you may have found yourself in a meeting without a hymnal, and you browse to certain hymn numbers and they're not available in the the app, the Sacred Music app, and that's because the license that the church has is only for reproduction in the book and not in the app. And so, you know, the terms of the license with the textbook manufacturer or the textbook publisher that you're describing in this situation may dictate that it's licensed to reside in one place but not in another place. I don't know. I mean, I'd be more than happy to try to chase down this particular license and see whether or not it authorizes reproduction on the Learning Suite. But in the event that it is not authorized by the license, then you're talking about, you know, you're just going through those same questions again, and you're making a reproduction onto Learning Suite, and you have to ask, is that reproduction, is it a fair use? You know, if it's because if the work's not in the public domain, you don't have permission, it's not covered by an exemption, you know, you're not making a performance or display, and reproducing an entire work onto Learning Suite that'll be a heavy lift. I'm not saying it's impossible. I mean, it could on a case-by-case basis, but that would be you'd have to have a pretty compelling case, I would say. So I think your best option would be to look at the terms of the license to see if it's covered. And if it's covered, great. If not, then maybe we could reach out to the publisher and see if we can get a license for this particular use.
Okay.
And although probably an easy workaround is not to necessarily put the PDF itself on Learning Suite, but to simply put the link to the library site where they can download it, which would be convenient. That's you're providing that convenience that they can find it there. And it's just one click away then to download it from the legitimate site, if you will.
Well, yeah, that's what I do for the students who are on BYU. That's no problem. But the ones who are going to be away from campus this fall, they won't have the ability. When they click on the link, it won't get them to the page.
Yeah, that technical issue. I haven't encountered that before. I mean, there are a few HR systems that require you to be physically on campus, but from the academic side, I've never encountered a situation where when I log in with my NetID and password from remotely when I'm traveling or something. So I mean, if we're dealing with like an OIT question about whether or not students who are participating in academic programs at the university from a remote distance should have access as if they were here on campus, that seems like a good question for OIT to me.
Yeah.
If it's through the library, that would be a better question for the library. This is one of the subject librarians. And most of our books that we have through the library should be able to be just accessed through your library link and then log in with your NetID and password. So if you're having questions about your library materials, just contact your subject librarian and they should be able to help you.
So there is a little technical wrinkle there that some of the services on campus, including in the library, require a BYU IP address so that you're logged in through BYU's network. Now, there are ways around that. Certainly for most full-time faculty, there's a virtual private network that you can do. I don't know if that's available to students, but that is an issue. That is an issue that we need to bring up and raise about how do off-campus students, have the credentials to access these on-campus resources.
Still bring it to the attention of your subject librarian because we might be able to buy a copy that doesn't require that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. I think that's a great question though, I appreciate you bringing that issue to our attention. So we'll, certainly if there's a license that's required, I mean, that's the function of our office, is to make sure that we have licensed in all of the content that we need to use on campus. So if we do reach a point where we're reaching out to publishers to get the right licensing in place, we'll be glad to assist with that as needed. Any other questions? All right, Richard, I think that may be it.
Looks like we're done. Thank you. We'd like to thank Peter and Cami for a very insightful and perhaps sometimes mind-bending little exercise here, but it was good for us to learn the intricacies, right? And I think we've oversimplified some things in the past, but this is good for us to know. So thank you, Peter and Cami. And thank all of you for coming to participate today, and we hope to see you in the future. And good luck with your classes in the fall.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.